to the Booker Prize podcast with me, Jo Hamia.
And me, James Walton.
And as you can hear, we're doing something a little different this week. This week, we are celebrating a coup of mine. Usually, this podcast is a haven for book lovers and protectors of literature.
No brow higher, that's our motto.
Exactly. And so I thought, what better place to have a Love Island episode?
Okay.
I have managed to convince James into watching Love Island.
Yep, yes, got permission from my wife to spend several hours watching hot women in bikinis.
But before that, it's my turn to express gratitude. Amber Spyglass episode went out last week and it's been doing really well. I'm going to give a little shout out to America and India, who are our top listened countries apparently, which is amazing.
and apparently we're big in Brunei.
Yeah, we're big in Brunei as well,
Yeah,
which I love. And also, I felt bad, James, about how I handled the whole Kendall mint cake situation.
Oh, yeah, Kendall mint cake gate.
I was quite mocking, wasn't I?
You seem to wonder whether it actually existed.
Or whether it was when it went out of fashion. I'm really sorry, but I'm really happy to report that my partner listened to this and he felt the same shock and outrage as you did. He actually loves hiking. He loves kind of, outdoorsy stuff. So he got me some Kendall mint cake and I had some.
Well, what do you reckon?
It's disgusting.
It actually is, yeah. I'm all in favour. All in favour of its fame and its important to its texture and its taste. I mean, everything about it really.
The texture is so bizarre. It's kind of like, I thought it was going to be. Well, it comes in a chocolate casing, and so
that's very modern.
That is it?
Yeah. No, didn't have any of that fancy stuff
casing
when I was hiking in the hills.
But then there was this kind of like gelled, minty stuff inside. And oh my God. I mean, I was kind of expecting something like an After Eight, but it was like too much filling, and then it got stuck to my teeth and it was really cloying. And I just thought, if I was at my wit's end as Lyra and Will are, I've just like taken down the kingdom of heaven. I've just been hunted mercilessly by the church. I think if someone gave me Kendall mint cake, I would just top myself.
That's the final straw. Yeah. Taking on the apocalyptic forces of evil is one thing, but eating this stuff, yeah, fair enough. But I'm pretty sure when I, as I say, hiked the fells, I don't think I had chocolate. It was just, it's just about energy, isn't it? I mean, it's meant to just give you energy, but the downside of it is it tastes horrible. Yeah.
So, no more delaying, James. I've been forcing you to watch Love Island. It's time for our Love Island Booker special.
It really is, and without giving too much away at this stage, I'm amazed how much I've got into it. I must say, the show itself a bit, but what we're about to do...
lot, be honest. Come on, you love it.
I mean, I've watched about 6 or 7 episodes of this series, and I must admit, I've taken a slightly lordly, chin-stroking interest in it.
So for people who don't watch Love Island or don't know what it is, but I genuinely can't imagine that because it's sort of like Big Brother at this point. Love Island is a sort of gamified version of dating. It's a reality TV show where really good-looking people go and spend 8 weeks in a villa in Mallorca, and their presence in the villa depends on their ability to form couples and form a convincing relationship with other people. And there's a £50,000 prize to be won at the end. So it's always in question whether these couples actually like each other or whether they're just, as is often said, playing a game.
So it does make sense in a way because the Booker Prize is also 50k. There's like a link. There's a link between them.
As I say, almost quite sweet. Some of the bits where the girls are talking amongst themselves had a slight Summer Nights vibe. They're saying, "He cuddled me all through the night."
Yeah.
Oh, tell me more.
It's great. They have these morning debriefs about how their relationship's going.
Yeah.
And it is sort of like it's like a really twisted Jane Austen novel. They're just updating each other. He held my hand, he brushed my arm, he mugged me off, he was talking to another girl. What am I to make of this?
So we're going to be coupling up characters from the Booker archive and seeing how they get on in our version of Love Island, which we're calling Booker Island.
We've each brought along 3 couples each. And Jo's going to explain her 3 couples first.
Yeah.
I'll make a few comments on them. I'll explain my 3. And then Booker Island begins.
So, My first couple
Yep.
are Sheba Hart from Zoe Heller's Notes on a Scandal,
Yep.
and Charles Araby from Iris Murdoch's The Sea. And my justification for this is that they are extremely delusional characters. They are deranged. Sheba famously is a teacher at a school, and she has an affair with one of her students. And in her eyes, this is a really romantic escape from the drudgery of her everyday sort of middle-class married life. And Charles Araby is a theatre director who kidnaps the woman he sees as the love of his life and basically tries to force her to fall back in love with him.
She was his first love, wasn't she? And then
Yeah.
he sees her kind of old, quite old and stout, I think she's described as.
Yeah. And he's like, she's perfect. I still love her.
So I think there's some hopes for these in the sense that she really likes being desired, Sheba, doesn't she?
Yeah, she really does.
And Charles Araby really likes desiring.
He really does.
So, okay, that's your first couple. Second?
Second couple are Saeed from Exit West and Cecilia from Atonement. So there are obvious connections there. Both of them have had their love lives completely ruined by war. But I think they do kind of align in the sense that Cecilia's famous line from Atonement is come back to me. She's an extremely loyal, faithful, hopeful person. She believes that things can get better. You can sort of rebuild after a war. And Saeed's love life in Exit West is also broken apart by war, but it's more a case that Nadia refuses to acknowledge their home country, whereas Saeed feels that he can rebuild, but he doesn't want to let go of all the things that have come before. So I think maybe Cecilia could help heal Saeed's broken heart in a way.
I foresee a couple of problems for Saeed on Love Island and with Cecilia. One is that he basically, I think in the end, prefers people of his own culture, doesn't he? And he's quite religious. And he just made that point. And the other thing is he doesn't believe in sex before marriage, which is going to make him a dodgy Love Island contestant.
But Cecilia is quite conservative.
And your third couple?
And my third couple are Marpessa from Paul Beatty's The Sellout.
This is a book we'll be discussing in more detail in a few weeks. But
yes.
Say a bit about her.
She is a bus driver. A lot has kind of gone wrong in her life.
Yeah, she's with a guy called, I think, MC Panache.
Yeah. Who gave her children she maybe particularly didn't want, or a child that she maybe didn't particularly want. And for the entirety of The Sellout, she's kind of chatting to her ex-boyfriend, Bon. Sort of, he's a farmer, and she's sort of swinging round to pick up, satsumas or watermelon from him and talk about the good old days when they used to.
If I may suggest, though, Joe, chatting is quite a gentle word for for her sort of means of dialogue. Because the narrator, who's the person, is Bon, who I think he certainly loves her. He says, that's what I first loved about Marpessa, her unabashed inappropriateness.
Yeah.
So she does sort of let everybody have it with both barrels most of the time, doesn't she?
And I think with Howard from Zadie Smith's On Beauty.
You're matching him with Howard from OK?
Yeah. I think Howard would be so into her. He would just absolutely, I think Marpessa would remind him of Kiki, his wife, when she was young. There's that bit On Beauty where he's kind of remembering what Kiki was like when she was young, and she had like a tiny waist, and he misses how sort of passionate and uninhibited she used to be. And now he's a university professor and all the fire has gone out of his life.
For poor old Howard, is that, as I say, she sort of lets everybody have it with both barrels. And one of the groups that she certainly does that to is white liberals, and he's the sort of classic example of that, isn't he? So he's absolutely sort of solid in his left-wing ideas. He's quite willing to tell the black conservative colleagues that they're wrong, they're wrong about black people, because he knows, because he's this whitey liberal. So do you think Marpessa would stand for that?
Absolutely not. But I have a feeling that Howard is the bottom, basically. I think Howard would quite enjoy being told off by an intelligent woman who's beautiful and the object of his kind of fantasies.
Okay, there's your three. Shall I give you my three?
Yeah, please do.
One thing I noticed in Love Island, actually, is that there seem to be three types of blokes as far as the women are concerned, which is
all right,
sweetheart, cheeky chappy and bad boy.
Mm.
For some reason, in Book of Books, cheeky chappies are thin on the ground. You could probably make a case for Howard, a tiny bit of a cheeky chappy. But anyway, I've started off with the most sweethearting of sweethearts, which is Douglas Peterson from David Nicholls' Us, long-listed in 2014. He absolutely devoted to his wife, although he actually says, as long as I have breath in my body, she would never lack sufficient AA batteries. But as he also knows, devotion is not always an appealing characteristic, as I know from my own experience, which actually happens quite a lot in Love Island. I think sweethearts sort of slightly get on the girls' nerves after a while, as far as I can say. Anyway, let's leave the Love Island.
There's such a thing as friendship couples, certainly, yeah.
So I've given him a bit of a challenge, actually, because his partner is Agnes Bain from Shuggie Bain, the famous alcoholic mother. But rather crucially, this is in the brief time when she's sober.
Okay.
There's one bit where she, actually the saddest line in the whole book, really, I think, is towards the end, and it's all sort of finished. Shuggie meets another child of an alcoholic, and they're sort of looking back on their lives. And Shuggie says of his mum, "My mammy had a good year once. It was lovely." Oh. And God, it is a really heartbreaking line, that. But anyway, so it's during that good year that Agnes comes to the island, because she went to AA, not locally, but in a posher part of Glasgow. It said it was a fresh start, she had thought, and hopefully a better class of alcoholic. so she gets to the better class of alcoholic. She sorts herself out. She becomes very sort of kind. It's stressed throughout the book that she's sort of pretty, really. She's the sort of Elizabeth Taylor of working class Glasgow. Yeah. And she's capable of great thoughtfulness when sober. I
think the Love Island villa might be a great place to her, because famously the islanders are only allowed a glass of Prosecco a day. They're not allowed to get drunk as of something like season 3 or 4. They took away most of the alcohol from that show.
I mean, good luck with getting Agnes to stop after one glass of Prosecco, though. I think
she'd have to go to the producers.
So that's one challenge. My next couple are Mrs. Coulter from Amber Spyglass, specifically Amber Spyglass, which we discussed
last week.
Last week, yes, it was last week. I mean, she's beautiful as well, very strikingly and importantly so. Yes. Everyone's smitten with her, including, I think I suggested, Philip Pullman.
And me.
And you. But the Metatron, who's a sort of representative of the majesty, of the voice of God, says to her, "Corruption and envy and lust for power, cruelty and coldness. You have never from your earliest years shown a shred of compassion or sympathy or kindness without calculating how it would return to your advantage. You have tortured and killed without regret or hesitation. You are a cesspit of moral filth." Maybe
perfect material for Love Island.
Maybe a little harsh, but I think almost exactly those same words could be applied to her partner, who I've given her, which is Henry VIII from Wolf Hall. And also, we join them in, this is Henry VIII from Wolf Hall, so again, sort of quite young and hunky. But that we join them both in a quite an interesting time, because in Amber Spyglass, she has dedicated her life to the magisterium, the sort of equivalent of the Catholic Church.
Yes.
But in Amber Spyglass, as we discussed, because of her love for her daughter Lyra, she is turning against it.
Yes.
You get the thing. Henry VIII, defender of the faith, the Pope has called him. Now he wants Anne Boleyn. He's turned against.
Yes.
The
I think
Church.
The difference is Miss Coulter has very honourable reasons for wanting to take down the Catholic Church, whereas Henry VIII just kind of wants a shag, doesn't he?
Yeah, so I suppose there is that. And then my final couple are, and now we return to the Sweethearts for Stevens, I think just about. He's the least cheeky chappy in the world.
Stevens from The Remains of the Day.
This is Mr. Stevens from The Remains of the Day by Ishiguro, the Booker winner in 1989. As you know, a butler. Wouldn't be very good at one important part of Love Island, which is Bants.
Yeah.
There's one bit, poor fella, he decided he's got this new American boss by the time the book begins after the war, and he says, and he realizes that he's expected to sort of banter.
Yeah.
And he says, "I must say, this business of bantering is not a duty I feel I can discharge with enthusiasm." He has a few kind of absolutely excruciating tries at banter. And towards the end of the book, rather sadly, he decides maybe banter is the key to human warmth.
Yes.
If he could just master it.
It definitely is the key to the villa. I mean, the whole day. So the islanders spend sort of 8 hours outside the villa, sort of in the garden by the pool. They're forced to be there by the producers, and all they have to do for the entirety of the day is pull each other for chats. This is Love Island lingo, that someone will approach another person and say, "Can we have a chat? Shall we go for a chat?" But
he's basically a decent guy. So just to remind people what happens in the book, it's set in 1956 after the war. He goes to see Miss Kenton, who'd been the housekeeper in his in Darlington Hall where he'd worked. And the two of them had this really painfully obvious love for each other that they could never, particularly him, bring themselves to admit or to articulate. So after he's seen her, they both realise what might have been, and they both end up in tears, partly because that might have been, but partly by the fact that it's now too late. He's also looking back on his time when he faithfully served Lord Darlington in the 30s. He insists that Lord Darlington wasn't a bad man, but he does have to admit, or at least half intuit or know really, that he was a Nazi sympathiser. Which brings us to his partner. Because I've paired him with the Duchess of Windsor, Mrs. Wallace Simpson, another real-life character.
Wonderful.
From Any Human Heart, longlisted for the book in 2002. She appears only briefly, but it's a book that intersects with real life a lot. The main character's Logan Mount Stuart. The book consists of his diaries. And during the 40s, he's sent to keep an eye on the Windsors because of their possible Nazi sympathies, and the British government want to make sure he doesn't get into any trouble. So they pack him off to be governor of Bermuda in the end. And Logan Mount Stuart keeps an eye on her. And he says she does exude a strange sexual attraction, given that she's not physically beautiful or alluring. The ideal dominatrix, if one were that way inclined.
Stevens is definitely that way inclined.
Well, I don't know, because he's got this fondness for sort of sentimental romantic novels, but at the same time he wants
a master or a mistress, though.
And he wants
it
to
gives
suck,
him purpose.
he wants to suck up to the upper. I can't imagine it.
Yeah.
I imagine him sort of darting up and down, just getting her whatever she wants, whatever drink she needs.
Yeah, definitely.
Whatever thing.
Her title would be a massive thing for him.
So that's therefore our couples are Sheba Hart and Charles Araby, Celia Tallis and Saeed from Exit West, Marpessa from The Sellout, and Howard Elsie from On Beauty. And we've got Douglas Peterson and Agnes Bain, Mrs. Coulter and Henry VIII, Stevens and the Duchess of Windsor. And so we come to our first twist in our role as slightly demonic producers like the actual real ones. We're going to introduce two bombshells. Do you want to, first of all, introduce the concept of the bombshell and then your actual bombshells?
Yeah, so the bombshell in Love Island is a new entry, a new contestant who comes into the villa at a really unexpected time. Usually at this point, most of the islanders are sort of coupled off. Maybe one or two are single and hanging about. Usually there's some turmoil rolling through the villa when a bombshell comes in. And the bombshell has to pick someone to couple up with, which essentially usually means they have to break a couple up. So my bombshells are going to be G from John Berger's G, who is famously based on a kind of Don Juan Casanova type figure. And this is an extract from just about the middle of G. And this is why I think G would make a great bombshell. G's come to a party and he's kind of looking around. He's trying to settle on someone to pick up, basically. And this is how it goes. So she notices G gazing at her. Most men, when they stare at an unknown woman who attracts them, have already begun in their imagination the process of seducing and undressing her. They already see her in certain positions with certain expressions on her face. They are already beginning to dream about her. And so when she intercepts their look, one of two things happens. Either they continue to stare at her shamelessly because her real existence does not disturb their dream, or else she will read a flicker of shame in their eyes expressed as a momentary hesitation to which she will be obliged to either respond encouragingly or discouragingly. He stares at her without shame or insolence. In his imagination, he has not laid a finger upon her. His purpose is to present himself as he is. Everything else can follow. It is as though he imagines himself naked before her, and she is aware of this. She recognizes that the man looking at her is utterly confident, that he has no need to hide anything, no need of any deception or covering. How is she to respond to such imprudence? This time the choice is not between encouragement or discouragement. If she lowers her eyes or looks away, it'll be tantamount to admitting that she has appreciated his temerity. To turn away will be to admit that she has seen him as he is. She will guard herself. She will preserve the memory of his magnificent imprudence. So I can just picture all the ladies not wanting to be seduced by G, and G just being utterly cool, just like having them roll over one by one.
This is one advantage we've got, is that our bombshells are sort of bombshelly. Whereas, I mean, the bombshells in Love Island are quite are bombshells, but so's everybody else. so it's always a bit odd. And
I think
he seems quite ruthless sexually because he seemed to be quite pleased when the First World War broke out because it would create a load of widows, which would increase his the sexually available women. So he comes in as a proper bombshell. And have you got a bombshell woman?
Yeah, I do. It's Marianne from Normal People. And now I'm going to preface this by saying that I love Normal People. It got me through a heartbreak a few years ago. I really do love that book. However, most of the plot of that book is Marianne being extremely unremarkable in every single way and men just falling at her feet.
If you want a discussion on wither Marxism, she's the girl for you, surely.
So I think Marianne would come in. Marianne, there's a whole kind of bit in the first third of the novel where, there's the summer she turns pretty, basically. She loses a load of weight. She starts applying eyeliner. She learns how to dress. She cuts her hair a bit. And, suddenly it's like a transformation. So I think she'd be a really attractive prospect for our boys.
We possibly should bear in mind that, well, she's quite masochistic, isn't she? She likes to be sort of hit and abused during sex.
Yeah, I think she recognises by the end of the book that's not a great impulse. No. I'm kind of picturing a Marianne who's sort of a bit reformed from all that.
The girls are now going to choose the ones who are in couples. Do they want to change either to a bombshell or to someone else from a different couple? And Joe is going to make the decision on behalf of all the girls. Right, well, I should explain that Joe has not taken this lightly. There's been a pause there for a few minutes while the girls have chosen. And I think we do have the girls, not only have the girls chosen, then we're going to dump two couples, or you're going to dump two couples. So let's hear, who have the girls gone for?
So traditionally, bombshells get first pick.
Okay.
And Marianne is the female bombshell.
Yep.
So I think Howard and Henry VIII are going to have gone after Marianne. Henry, because his head turns with every woman he sees. The man had 6 wives. And I just think any bombshell that came in, he would immediately run towards. So he would try and chat Marianne up for a bit, but I don't think she would be very impressed. Yep. I think Howard would be particularly impressed by Marianne. Howard on Beauty does have an affair. And I think Marianne is right up his alley. She's a university student. She's exactly the kind of person he'd come across over the course of the novel.
With one of his students.
With one of his students.
So similar politics. So she chooses Howard.
I think she would choose Howard and live to regret it. And then from there, I'm going to say that Sheba Hart would be up next.
Yeah.
And I think Sheba would be absolutely swept away by G. I think he's perfect for her sort of, romantic ideal of life. So a lot of...
I suppose if a 15-year-old boy showing her a bit of attention is good enough
exactly
to turn her head, then, the world's biggest Casanova will certainly do the trick.
So I feel like Sheba does have this sort of... she doesn't have a hold on reality. I feel like she would see G. G chats up, all the girls in the villa, but she would really take it seriously. She would think that obviously she's meant for him. I'm going to have Agnes choose Saeed.
That's a curious one. Why so?
I think, so we were talking about Saeed's sort of conservatism and Celia kind of... turning it about in her head. I think ultimately Cecilia would kind of want a more exciting lifestyle.
Yeah. I see what you mean. So Agnes has had an exciting lifestyle. She's had enough of exciting lifestyles.
I think Agnes would recognise a really good influence in Saeed. The kind of impulse to do good. Like there's this breathtaking passage in Exit West where Saeed prays fundamentally as a gesture of love for what had gone and what would go and could be loved in no other way. When he prayed, he touched his parents who could not otherwise be touched, and he touched a feeling that we are all children who lose our parents, all of us, every man and woman and girl and boy, and we too will all be lost by those who come after us and love us, and this loss unites humanity. unites every human being, the temporary nature of our beingness and our shared sorrow, the heartache we each carry, and yet too often refuse to acknowledge in one another. And out of this, Saeed felt it might be possible, in the face of death, to believe in humanity's potential for building a better world. So he prayed as a lament, as a consolation, and as a hope. And I think Agnes, that capacity he has for hope, but also for forgiveness and moving on.
I can see that. Agnes does. I mean,
she needs it.
Yeah, she needs it. She's not very good at knowing
Yeah.
what she needs, but don't forget we're joining her in the sober time.
Yeah. I think the Duchess of Windsor is going to stick with Stevens.
Yeah.
I think she's being well catered to.
Another gin and tonic, darling.
Yeah,
Okay.
no issues there. And I'm going to have Mrs. Coulter stick with Henry VIII.
The theological debates are heating up, aren't they? And
They are.
I
I think they're sort of at the moment they're still sort of teasing each other out.
Okay.
She's none too happy that Henry's gone after Marianne, but I have this kind of fantasy of Henry going back to her and saying, "Well, you're obviously the superior woman." That leaves Cecilia, Charles Araby, Marpessa, and Douglas, who I am going to dump.
What?
From the eye, I'm going to
Douglas.
kick them
Can't catch a
out.
break.
I think
Okay.
Douglas probably a bit too nice.
But they're going to run out of AA batteries.
I think Charles
Sorry, when the old remote's not working. But anyway, go.
Charles Araby, he's just not. I mean, I think basically in my mind how it would go is that Celia would she would choose Charles Araby because I think they probably have a lot of posh chat together, but it's a friendship couple.
Friendship couples have no interest to us, are they?
No interest,
No,
they're dumped.
okay, no,
and I
hang
think
on.
Marpessa would be last to choose, and she'd be left with Douglas, who is just
I thought
too sweet for
Oh,
her.
yeah.
Far too sweet for her, and I just don't think they're compatible at all. So dumped.
Yeah, fair enough. To be honest, faced with Marpessa, Douglas might fancy just getting the hell off the island.
Yeah,
I think she
exactly.
would be too much for him.
She would eat him alive.
Okay, so we now have, ladies and gentlemen, listeners, we have our final 5 couples at the moment. Sheba and G, Duchess of Windsor and Stephen still together, Marianne and Howard, Agnes, Bain and Saeed, and Mrs. Coulter and Henry VIII still hanging on in there. So now we're going to set them the first challenge
We
in a
are.
Love Island style. He said, pretending he knows what the hell's going on.
So our first challenge is the baby challenge. Towards the end of the show, we're going to move this forward slightly.
Yeah.
Towards the end of the islanders' time in the villa, they awake to the sound of mechanical babies. And they go into a room and there are all these little plastic children arranged in cots for them. And they have to take care of them for a day. And so we are going to give a fake plastic child to each of our remaining couples and see how they fare.
Okay. And at the end of that, we're going to dump the least parental successful couple.
Yes, we are.
Okay. And that is...
So how would Sheba and G do as parents? I think they'd be awful.
yeah, sort of... I mean, G, I can't imagine being the most paternal. He's not...
Well, G does have a bit of an evolution as he goes through the novel, but I'm really
evolution
imagining
into
him...
loving fatherhood.
No, not quite.
No. Okay.
I mean, he acquires some morals, but I'm sort of imagining him midway through the book when he's still floundering around Europe before he's, gotten a wider awareness about human consciousness and war. And so I would say G shows absolutely no interest in this baby. Sheba is a teacher and she does have children of her own. So I think she wouldn't mind motherhood so much, but it's not why she came to the villa.
Do we think that anybody dodgier than them as parents? I think Marianne and Howard had
they'd be okay.
They'd be okay. I
Very
mean,
bland
I feel
parents.
slightly sorry for the kid. He'd have to be learning his sort of Shakespeare at the age of 3 or something, wouldn't he? But,
Yeah.
But okay. But that'd be one
Communist
of those.
Manifesto read to them
Yeah.
at the age of 4 months.
Duchess of Windsor and Stevens again. Not ideal.
Oh, they'd have a nanny. They
Yes,
would
yeah.
absolutely, they would
Okay.
outsource their
But
parenting
so-
100%. But do you know what? I think that's probably a very self-aware thing for them to do.
Agnes, Bain and Saeed, I think they'd both be loving it.
Yeah.
Wouldn't they?
Well,
They
I
might be
mean,
pretty good.
Agnes isn't the best. Isn't the best mother for
No,
most
but
of Shuggie.
that would be true. But don't forget, this is still sober Agnes, as far as we know. She has yet to
Okay,
be. She
we're
has yet
clinging to that line.
She's yet to be at the old prosecco. And Mrs. Coulter and Henry VIII. Well, as far as I can see, that would depend quite largely on whether it was a boy or a girl. Because do we still think that child might still be better off than under Sheba and G?
Well, yeah, because he's a prince, basically.
So it's down to Sheba and G versus Mrs. Coulter and Henry VIII. I mean, if I was the producers of the actual show, I suspect they'd be more interested keeping Mrs. Coulter and Henry VIII going, but you know.
You're so right, James. You really are. You've got the producer's instinct. Okay, Sheba and G are gone. They've been dumped from the island.
Okay. Well, as the excitement mounts, with 4 couples left, Duchess of Windsor and Stevens, Marianne and Howard, Agnes, Bain and Steed, and Mrs. Coulter and Henry VIII, I'm going to throw in my 2 bombshells.
Oh, I'm so excited for
and
this.
They are... My first bombshell, definite bombshell, I think. Patrick Melrose from Mother's Milk by Edward St. Aubyn, shortlisted for the Booker in 2006. And Patrick Melrose, sexy enough to have been played on screen by Benedict Cumberbatch. 4th novel in a series about his life, his very kind of troubled life. We join him in this when he's married and he's got 2 children, but he's very sexually frustrated because his wife has basically retreated into motherhood, and they've become what he refers to as parental bureaucrats. So anyway, so in he comes. Likes a drink though. Might be significant. Agnes Bain. Anyway, we'll see. And then this is a real Love Island twist, because my other bombshell is none other than Miss Kenton.
Ooh.
Stephen's long lost love.
Oh, you've really gone down.
I really have. I've
the
gone
producer route here.
I really, really have. So anyway, she in fact has married since she knew Mr. Stevens, but it's not a very happy marriage. She keeps leaving her husband, but she basically feels she's stuck with it. This is what she says to him towards the ending. You know, one of the many sad parts of the book. To Mr. Stevens, you get to thinking about a different life, a better life you might have had. For instance, I get to thinking about a life I might have had with you, Mr. Stevens. And I suppose that's when I get angry over some trivial little thing and leave. But each time I do so, I realise before long my rightful place with my husband. After all, there's no turning back the clock now. Except, is there? Because in she comes as the bombshell with the men now to choose. It means that I get to choose, which means that we again pretend that it takes me a second while I scribble loads and loads of possibilities on bits of paper. So, bit of paper, please. So Patrick, our bombshell, gets first choice, and naturally he goes for, although possibly with dodgy consequences, he's gone for Agnes Bain.
So how is he going to get the connection? They both have substance abuse issues, but is this something that they've confided in each other about?
Yes, they have. They've had all of their chats.
Okay.
Let's imagine.
He's pulled her for a chat.
Yeah,
and
no, she's nice, and they've got shared... They've got absolutely shared issues. They've both been alcoholics, or both are alcoholics.
So maybe it went something like, you know, Patrick says, I used to be a bit of a bad boy, but I'm nice now, and Agnes goes, tell me more. Yeah. And it all comes out.
Yeah, and you think you're bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, isn't Agnes slightly scornful of people's, like, rubbish confessions at AA?
She is, yeah.
What? That's all you've done? Anyway, so...
to be fair, Patrick's fucking awful.
Patrick's pretty out there. So those two go together because of their shared history and interest in what that history has done to them. And also, I suspect, underneath it all, maybe a bit of enabling going on, that they realise that they'd actually have quite a good time together if they could just steal all the Prosecco. Yeah. Anyway, that's my choice. Patrick and Agnes Bain. Henry VIII is going to stick with Mrs. Coulter, slightly to her annoyance. Yeah, dismay, exactly. But he's choosing. Howard sticks with Marianne, again, slightly to her dismay, but young students he likes, as we've established.
I think this is the most problematic episode we're going to put out.
We've got the big moment, which is Stephen's going to pluck up the courage to dump the Duchess of Windsor? This would be an absolute defining moment in his life, actually.
It really would.
Would he dump the Duchess of Windsor, posh, Nazi-sympathising toff?
Yeah.
And if finally, after all these years, declare himself to Miss Kenton? And, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to say the answer is yes. He's doing it. He's gone for it. He's actually managed to escape her clutches. He's all last gin and tonic, obviously. He's not going to, and is very apologetic. But off he goes, and he's with Miss Kenton at last.
This is fan fiction on the highest level, James.
It's one of the great moments in podcasting.
There we go.
And but it's only bad news for Saeed, who's now left with the Duchess of Windsor. And I think,
Famously racist.
Famously racist. So I think she would find him a little bit too brown. So I think that the couples I'm going to dump at this stage are Saeed and the Duchess of Windsor, because I don't think they've got anything in common. They're just lumped together, and both of them would be quite happy to be out of it. And also, I'm going to dump Howard and Marianne, because I think she, again, would want to get back to
Connell?
Or just
like
just to get away from. I think in the end, I think Howard would, be too much for her. I think, or maybe even too attentive. And sometimes Connell's too attentive to her, isn't she?
Oh,
isn't he?
Like you said, she's
and she certainly could do better physically, I think. So we now have our last three to face one final challenge: Patrick, Melrose, and Agnes Bain. Cracking night out, but I'd leave by 11 if I was with them. Henry VIII and Mrs. Coulter still hanging on in there. I think she probably wants to get the hell out, but who knows? And then, as I say, this final triumph of love, Stevens and Miss Kenton. Okay, so now we have one last challenge, which is, Joe,
the headline challenge.
And how does this work now?
So the islanders are completely cut off from the quote unquote real world during that. I'm now speaking about the actual TV show.
Yeah, okay. And for our purposes, I think
the same would happen.
Yeah, they only know about each other what each other's told them.
Yeah, in the real Love Island, these people have absolutely no idea what's going on in the real world. The islanders don't have phones, they don't have access to the internet, they don't know what's being said about them. They also have no idea about each other's personal histories. All they know about each other really is what the other has decided to tell them. Okay. And so the headline challenge introduces a slice of the real world back into the villa. Various headlines about contestants' pasts, or what the public think of them, are read out. And this inevitably causes it's never positive. It never can be. I mean, all news is bad news. It causes some tension.
And so can we apply that now to our three couples here?
Yes. So I think, it's very difficult with Patrick and Agnes, because they've already told each other that they have substance abuse.
Yeah, or if they haven't, they might just think, yay. Cracking, once we get off this island, we're going to have one of the great nights out. Henry VIII and Mrs. Coulter, I think you had a rather ingenious idea for this.
So my theory for this is that Mrs. Coulter would absolutely not trust whatever the producers were handing to her. I think she would have snuck an alethiometer, which is a kind of truth-telling device from the His Dark Materials trilogy, into the villa, and she would ask it. At this point, she would ask it questions about what was true or not. And I think she would find out that Henry VIII had designs on her life, that he's already plotting ahead.
I can't quite remember, even though it was only last week. And is this instrument clever enough to sort of tell what might happen in the future? I think it was, wasn't it?
Well, witches give prophecies in the Amber Spyglass. So maybe, I don't know, I don't think the producers would let a witch fly into the villa to give Miss Coulter. No, but I think Miss Coulter is smart enough to go to a balcony or a terrace and do it without them realising.
So she gets to know about Henry's future as well as his past.
She's got a very unfair advantage there.
I didn't realise this. I only found this yesterday. The last 5 wives were in the last 15 years of his life. Yeah. Anyway, that's by the by.
Do you know, I have a feeling Miss Coulter would murder Henry in the middle of the night in cold blood. She'd find this out and she'd go, absolutely not. And since she's got an heir to the throne, I think she's got what she wanted out of him.
That's a brilliant twist. Yeah, that's right.
I think Mrs. Coulter kills Henry VIII after the headline challenge.
As they say in The Simpsons, I think it's Marge's sisters say about Homer, once you've planted the seed, you just throw away the packet. So
Henry's dead.
Henry's dead. So they're out. Okay.
No, they're not out. Miss Coulter is still there. Okay. I think she's standing solo. Or maybe she shouldn't kill him.
No, I think she's killed him.
Yeah,
and which is fine. Except she's left
herself. It's fine.
Except that she failed to think. She's left herself single,
and therefore she is dumped from the island.
She's dumped from the island, and we have our finalists. And listen, we can argue about who's going to win, but I think we are, the way it's working now. As I say, with Henry VIII dead and Miss Coulter's single.
So
That's the
I
end
think,
of them.
so Miss Coulter may have cut herself off at the knees there a little bit, because I have this sense that she may have manipulated the public vote. But, you know, the thing about Love Island is that the final vote is always down to the public. So we have to put ourselves into the minds of the British nation now. Would the thing about Love Island is that everyone loves the chaos. Everyone loves the drama, the juice, the gossip. And so you have Stevens and Mrs. Kenton, who are the sort of ideal love story, you know, lost each other along the way and then reignited their love for each other. But then you have TV gold in the form of Patrick and Agnes, who by this point have probably found the Secchi. They've broken into the producer's stash. They're throwing parties.
You get a bottle of champagne when you win, in which case they'd never be seen again.
And they'd get 50 grand at the end of all of this. Imagine the party they'd throw. So now, James, you really have to imagine yourself into the heart of the British public here.
I mean, as you know, Joe, we're fond of each other, but this isn't a compliment, which is you might be closer to the normal Love Island than I am. I mean, you've watched loads of series, like I just haven't.
I am. I can't deny.
So why don't? I know what you're going to do. You're going to go for the Mr. Stevens and Miss Kenton are not going to win, are they?
Oh, see, we're disagreeing now. This is brilliant. So we're at an impasse.
I don't think we are really. I think I would go with your reading of Love Island, and at least Stevens, they don't win, but at least they're together. That'll gladden my heart enough.
But you know, Love Island always has runners up, and famously, well, this is the thing. It's kind of a thing that people in second place are destined to break up, and people in third place are destined to stay together for at least a couple of years.
Unlikely in our case, given Henry VIII's sad demise. But anyway, okay. Yeah, but
I suppose Miss Coulter came third, really.
Yeah.
Because,
you'd be all right. No, I'll go with that. And also, to be fair, yeah, I mean, and, you know, with all due respect to Stevens and Miss Kenton, they're not going to be in hot demand on chat shows, are they?
No.
so
I can see them having a kind of Channel 4, 30-minute documentary made about them.
Yeah, where are they now?
Exactly.
Pottering around, doing not very much. Okay, then I'll give it to you. Our Love Island, Booker Island champions are Patrick Melrose and Agnes Bain.
And if you disagree and you really do think that Stevens and Miss Kenton would win, write in and tell us. We should do a poll. We will do a poll.
Yeah, let us know what you think. For logistical reasons, we haven't been able to throw it open to the public for the final bit, but we'd still love to hear what you have to say, and we will report back on it and see if we get roundly told off, or let's hope roundly applauded. Well, thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our experimental, something different for the summer, but I must say hugely enjoyable Booker Island. Thanks very much, Jo. A lot of fun.
Oh, thank you so much for taking this seriously, James. I really didn't expect it to be this fun.
Oh, great, thank you.
And that's all from us. If you haven't already followed the show, please do, and remember to leave a rating.
You can find us at thebookerprizes.com and on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Substack at The Booker Prizes. So join us next week when we'll be discussing a novel loved by both Peter Carey and Stormzy, which is DBC Pierre's Vernon Godlittle.
And obviously, please do tell us who you think should have won Booker Island.
Yeah, please do. We're very interested in that.
Until next time. Bye.
Goodbye. The Booker Prize podcast is hosted by Joe Hamya and me, James Walton. It's produced and edited by Benjamin Sutton, and the executive producer is John Davenport. It's a Daddy Super Yacht production for the Booker Prizes.